It is my distinct pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Lillemoe. And I've known Dr. Lillemoe for many years, and the process of putting together this introduction has allowed me to know him even better, and for that I am very grateful. But this story starts in a very small town in South Dakota, Aberdeen, in the northeast corner of the state. Settled in 1880, was first a railroad town, but today the #1 employer is the hospital, which is common for lots of small towns. It's known for being the place that the Super 8 motels were founded, very important. And there apparently are two famous people that were born in this town. Frank Baum, who wrote The Wizard of Oz, and Keith Lillemoe, shown here in this baby picture. You can imagine growing up in small town South Dakota what it was like, and it was mostly about family. Keith had an incredibly supportive family, parents Pat and Kenny, and brothers Kent and Tommy, and families of course have great influence on all of us, but for Keith there were some special things. His youngest brother died of leukemia when Keith was in high school, and that year-long illness had a very important impact on Keith, and of course was probably responsible for Keith becoming a doctor. He went to the University of South Dakota in 1971 to 1974. It's in Vermillion, South Dakota, the Coyotes. And again, probably two famous people from the University of South Dakota, Tom Brokaw and Keith Lillemoe. On to medical school in 1974, and at the time, South Dakota had a 2-year medical school where you would complete your initial 2 years, and then you graduated, and then you went on to another medical school to finish up. And there were various relationships around the country they were affiliated with South Dakota. And so Keith graduated at 2 years as a summa graduate, and was obviously the superior student at that medical school. And there were several important things that then happened. He met and married Cheryl, his lifelong wife. We'll hear more about Cheryl in a minute. But he was also mentored by a local surgeon in Aberdeen. And that had a very important impact, and contrary to popular belief, this is probably why Keith became a surgeon. His later influences at Hopkins were important, but he became a surgeon because of this mentorship. He then made the critical decision to go to Johns Hopkins to finish up his last 2 years of medical school. And that started more than a quarter century at Hopkins, which I'll get to in a minute. Keith was a highly regarded student at South Dakota, winner of the State Medical Association Scholarship in '75, and the K.O. and Wheeler Scholarships in '75, the Medical Faculty Scholarship in 1976, the Mosby Book Award in '76, and the Outstanding Student Award. Keith was clearly the best student in that class. So on to Johns Hopkins to finish up his last 2 years, and developed an interest in surgery, as we talked about. This is before the match, and so he interviewed at Duke, Michigan, and Johns Hopkins. He then canceled his interview at the Massachusetts General Hospital because he had decided to go to Johns Hopkins. So most of this presentation is a Johns Hopkins story, as many of you know. His more than a quarter of a century at Hopkins has been incredibly impactful, and we'll talk about that. So the final 2 years of medical school, graduating AOA, started his surgical training in 1978. Keith did a research fellowship at Walter Reed, 80 to 82. He joined the faculty in 1985, became full professor in 1996, associate program director, vice chair, and won the faculty teaching award 5 times, and I'll get into the details of that in a second. Another important thing happened at Hopkins. He started this incredible family, which then grew to a very large family. Wife Cheryl, son Christopher, daughters Shannon, Rebecca, and Heather. They grew up as children of Johns Hopkins and spent all their formative years in Baltimore. And these are just some of the pictures of them growing up. But Keith was clearly a shooting star. He and a handful of others at Hopkins at that time were destined for greatness in American surgery, and Keith was one of those, and there were several reasons for that. Keith took care of a lot of famous patients. He was the go-to guy as he was coming up for abdominal problems. These are just a couple of news clips of some of the famous patients he took care of. Eric Davis from the Orioles and also Luke Powell. But there were lots of famous people that were knocking on Keith's door because he was such a great clinician and still is today. And I tried to look at academic impact of his time at Johns Hopkins, and Keith is a team scientist, like most of us in the room, and Keith worked in a group of people that had incredible impact. And what I did, if you look at Keith's CV, he's got hundreds of manuscripts, but I looked at the top 10. And if you Google Scholar, the top 10, you find out that these papers are incredibly cited. And there is no greater accolade than to say that people are reading your stuff, and then they think it's so important that they're citing your stuff. And that's what's remarkable about Keith's collaborative work when he was at Hopkins, and generating a lot of things that we all read and read about today. Because of his outstanding work, Keith had a variety of awards. These are just some of them. I've tried to truncate because they limited this presentation to an hour. But the 1992 Washington Academy of Surgery Research Award, the Lillemoe Award for Research in '82 and '84. He got the Medal of Commendation from Walter Reed Institute of Research in '83, the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine Clinician Scientist Award in '86. Again, the Faculty Teaching Award, 1990, 91, 95, 2000. And in 2003, they gave up and just called it the Keith Lillemoe Award. I mean, how's that for an impact on surgical education? We're going to talk a little bit about his time at IU, but he was after getting the Alumni Leadership Award from South Dakota, was the Outstanding Faculty Award winner in 2010 from IU, Indiana University Trustee Teaching Award in 2011, the Founders Medal from the SSAT, an honorary degree from Harvard, the Walter Koch Award Medal in 2012, and in 2015 the Johns Hopkins University Society of Scholars, which is an extraordinary accomplishment. He's been very, very active in the process of publication. We all know about his time on the editorial board of the Annals, and now the editor-in-chief of the Annals, but also very active on a variety of other journals, and these are just the editorial board that I would mention here: Journal of American College of Surgeons, the Journal of Gastrointestinal Surgery, the Journal of Surgical Research, Annals of Surgical Oncology. You can read the rest. Keith has been very, very active in the process of publication. I had to significantly truncate his involvement in societies, and then I've just listed here the ones where he was president. Keith has served as the president of the SUS, 1996 to 7, the Baltimore Academy of Surgery, 2000, the SSAT president, 2004, president of the Society of Clinical Surgery, 2004 to 6, the chairman of the Fellowship Council, 2006 to 2008. At Indiana, he was president of AOA, 2007, 2008, the Halstead Society president, and again, our president of the ASA, 2016 to 2017. In 2003, Keith was called to Indiana to be the J. Grossfeld Professor and Chairman of the Department of Surgery at Indiana University School of Medicine. He had an incredibly important 8 years there. Following Dr. Grossfeld was a very important part of the history of that department, and he had a great impact. But in 2011, the East Coast called again. And Keith, this time, ended up at the Massachusetts General Hospital. And he has followed in some incredible footsteps. Here shown Dr. Russell, Dr. Jerry Austin, Andy Warshaw, and Keith as the most recent chairs of that department. Big shoes to fill, but I think Keith probably is probably approached with different problems than they had in the past. And here's just an example. On the upper left, you see this very famous Ether Day picture, and this depicts the history of the MGH. John Collins Warren, the first dean of the Harvard Medical School, removing a neck tumor from a patient as faculty and staff look on. And this is what Keith is facing. In June of 2013, Keith Lillemoe, the Surgeon-in-Chief of the Massachusetts General Hospital, wins a pie-eating contest as faculty and staff look on. So I think Keith's challenges perhaps are different than they have been in the past. Just a little bit about Keith's hobbies. If you talk to Keith for approximately 2 minutes, you're talking about sports at about 2.5 minutes. And in the upper right, you see his exploits as a football player and a basketball player in high school. You see also on the right, he still thought he was an athlete as a resident, because you see him with the resident basketball team and the resident softball team. He had time to coach Little League baseball, and he also has had time to attend pretty much every Super Bowl, World Series, and Final Four. I have no idea how he has time to be an academic surgeon. Just a little bit about Keith's fascination with music. This is a quote from the Hopkins Medical News in 2002. Lillemoe, a native of South Dakota, favors the music of achy heartbreak while he operates. He calls for suction. Garth Brooks sings quietly of "Ropin' the Wind." I love that. The poster you see on the right sits in his house. I took a picture of it. Is a signed poster of the Rolling Stones. I think Keith is probably some sort of music freak, as far as I can tell. I'm going to close, and I'm going to say 3 things about Keith. Keith is clearly a surgical leader by any way you measure that. We had our very, very best medical student at Duke this year who was going to go into surgery, went out and interviewed, and he came back, and I asked him to come and talk to me about where he wanted to go, and I said, "Where do you want to match?" And he says, the Massachusetts General Hospital, and I said, "Why?" And he said, "I want to train with Keith Lillemoe." And that's what a surgical leader does. They draw incredible talent around them, and Keith has that innate ability. Keith has been an extraordinary partner with his wife, and this is really a partnership. They have tackled their personal lives and Keith's professional life head-on as a partnership, and this has given him great strength, and I know he appreciates Cheryl's undying support. And finally, Keith's a family man, and I know he loves his family. Here on the right, you see the young family in Baltimore, and then in the lower left, a more recent picture of the extended family. I think probably the proudest thing you can call Keith is a family man. So it is my great pleasure to introduce Keith D. Lillemoe, Chief of the Department of Surgery, Surgeon-in-Chief of the Massachusetts General Hospital, the W. Gerald Austin Professor of Surgery of the Harvard Medical School, and the President of the American Surgical Association, 2016-2017. Keith?